Houston, Texas, November 2015. Beyond the neon glow of a roadside motel, 20-year-old Shelby Thornburg's life came to a sudden and violent end. What investigators found inside her room was not just the aftermath of a crime, but the beginning of a mystery. Each detail, each unanswered question pulls us deeper into the story of hidden dangers, fleeting trust, and a predator lurking in plain sight. This is not just a tale of a life lost, but of a tragedy whose wounds continue to hurt long after the lights went out. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts, and I post new true crime documentaries every single week. No overblown drama, just classic true crime. So if that's your kind of thing, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's totally free. It just lets you know when I post new cases. It was November 4th, 2015, and on this particular day, 20-year-old Shelby Thornburg had to meet a client in the evening. It was 8 p.m., and Shelby's phone buzzed with a phone call from said client. According to records, the client told Shelby that he was on his way. At around 8:34 p.m., Shelby received another text from that same client that read, "Hey, I'm here." Shelby then texted her manager, Mark, 10 minutes later with the code word, "Good." Mark was in charge of finding clients for Shelby, and the pair came up with a code word that would let Mark know that Shelby had met the client, that they had paid, and that they were going to get down to business. So when Mark received that text, he was relieved, and he didn't bother Shelby for a good chunk of time. Generally, after the client left, Shelby would let Mark know that the job was done and everything went a-okay. But Mark waited, and he never got that call or text. This prompted Mark to call Shelby, but she wasn't picking up. Now this was odd. This was a scheduled meeting, which meant that once the time was up, the client had to wrap things up and leave. They couldn't just stay in Shelby's apartment as long as they wanted to. So Mark decided to go to the apartment and check on Shelby himself. When he opened Shelby's door and made his way into Shelby's living room, he stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes registered the scene in front of him, and it's amazing that he didn't collapse in sheer terror in that moment. Shelby was lying face down in the bed in the living room, motionless. There was no one with her in the room. It looked like the client had already left. He saw the alarming sight of red stains all over the wall by the bed and on the bed. It didn't take Mark long to realize that someone had murdered Shelby. Mark immediately rushed out of the apartment and dialed 911. When the operator picked up, the first words out of Mark's mouth were, "Someone is dead. Someone's killed my girl." Shelby Thornburg was born on August 18th of 1995 in Fort Worth, Texas. Her mom actually conceived Shelby after she had an affair with a man named Shannon during one of her many off periods with her partner, Robert. When Shelby's mom, Leslie, found out that she was pregnant, Shannon basically left her to deal with the pregnancy on her own. So Shelby never had a real father figure in her life. This would cause some serious trauma for her, the effects of which would span decades. For Robert, the news of Leslie's infidelity was also hard to swallow, as their relationship was already on the rocks, but he decided to stick around nonetheless, giving Shelby some semblance of a father figure, but not really. Robert was Shelby's paternal figure, but sadly only on paper. The relationship between Leslie and Robert can be defined as messy and tumultuous at best. Leslie was way younger than Robert. She was only 18 when she had her first daughter, Christina, whereas Robert was in his mid-20s. It also didn't help that Robert spent the majority of his time behind bars rather than at home, because he was involved in substance abuse and other criminal activities. But on the other hand, Leslie, who had to raise 2 daughters on her own, fought with depression and soon fell into the pit of addiction too. At one point, Leslie had a run-in with the law for writing bad checks. It was just not the ideal environment for 2 young girls who had no one to look after them. So Shelby was raised by her stepsister, Christina, and the two would become best friends. Christina was Shelby's protector. She tried to shield her from every evil of this world, and even as a young girl, she did a pretty good job. Fast forward to 2001. Leslie was thrown behind bars for fraud, and in 2004, after Robert and Leslie both lost their parental rights, Christina and Shelby were placed in the foster system. But sometime later, they were taken back in by Robert, who was now out of prison. But nothing would ever be close to normal for the girls after all this had transpired. Shelby and Christina were repeatedly taken advantage of by Robert. And at one point, Christina was kicked out of the home after she got pregnant and gave birth to a baby boy. Sadly, history repeated itself, because not long after this, Shelby was forced into adult work and she fell pregnant by a guy named LeCurt Fisher, who went by the name Kurt. He was 18, whereas Shelby was only 14 when this went down. Around this same time, Shelby finally called Child Protective Services on Robert, and he was arrested for good. Kurt also faced assault charges and was thrown in prison. 9 months later, on May 11th of 2011, Shelby gave birth to a baby boy and named him Logan. But since Shelby was still so young, just 15 at the time, and she couldn't take care of the baby as she was still in foster care, she had to give Logan up for adoption. Logan was eventually adopted by a loving family, and they even allowed Shelby to visit him from time to time. But about a year after this, tragedy would strike yet again. On August 9th of 2012, Shelby and Christina's mom, Leslie, passed away at the age of just 38. And even though she wasn't the best mom, Shelby and Christina were naturally devastated by her passing. But even though Shelby's life wasn't perfect, she was determined to make it better. But that was easier said than done. Due to complications with asthma in her childhood, Shelby struggled with obesity, and that was a huge insecurity of hers. She wasn't able to go out and run and play with the other kids simply out of fear of having a severe asthma attack, and this led her to gain weight uncontrollably and led to some pretty severe obesity, but she was able to get past this later on in life. By 2014, Shelby had been working towards becoming a nursing aide, but fate yet again had other plans. She fell pregnant again, but unfortunately this time, the baby girl didn't make it. Shelby suffered from a huge emotional blow because of this loss, and from there, she found herself entangled with the law and her declining mental health. She began doing something that she had seen many people doing in her home growing up, and that was adult work. Something she'd narrowly escaped from in the past, but now the proposition was much more enticing. If you remember, Shelby was very insecure about her weight, and she wanted to get some cosmetic procedures done. But those were expensive procedures. In her mind, once she got the procedures done, she would get one step closer to becoming a model. She knew that adult work was temporary. She needed money, and she needed it fast, so it was the only option, or at least she felt that way, for her at the time. Thus, she moved to Houston and started working as an adult worker. But things went down pretty fast from there. She soon got arrested for solicitation, and after she got released, she crossed paths with a man named Marcus Dwayne Johnson, who went by the alias of Mark D. Mark showered Shelby with the finer things in life. He would take her on luxury vacations in Las Vegas, Los Angeles, to the Bahamas, and Shelby and Mark posted pictures of themselves together on social media. So, from a third-person perspective, Mark looked like Shelby's boyfriend. But that wasn't the case. Mark D was Shelby's adult work manager, meaning he arranged all of her clients and meetings. Shelby was Mark's main girl. She attracted a lot of clients, and Mark was making good money, which could be the reason why he was lavishly spending so much of that money on Shelby. Soon enough, Mark even moved Shelby into a very nice and safe apartment complex in Houston, but they soon ran into a problem. Mark and Shelby had a hard time bagging clients because of the strict security checks, and when there were no clients, that meant no money. So this left Mark with no choice but to relocate Shelby to a not-so-safe apartment complex, Conquistador Apartments in the 7500 block of Bel Air, and she settled in apartment 3B. Now, this area was a hotspot for adult work, and it also wasn't safe for a lone young woman, but Shelby had to do what she had to do. Shelby mostly worked from her apartment, which wasn't the safest because random strangers literally knew where she lived. But again, this was the only option on the table for her at this time. But problems soon began to arise, big ones. Shelby got arrested yet again. She was let off with a slap on the wrist the first time around, but that wasn't going to be the case this time. She was facing some serious prison time, and she'd now reached out to a lawyer to help get these charges lessened or even lifted entirely. But things weren't looking good, and it was very likely that Shelby was going to be locked away for quite some time. But this would never happen, because no sooner than Shelby had these charges placed against her, she was found murdered. When the police arrived at the scene following Mark's 911 call, they were stumped. Nothing seemed stolen, there were no signs of forced entry, and the biggest alarming sight was that there wasn't any indication of a struggle. They asked Mark about Shelby's routine and what she did that night, if she met with anyone, etc. That was when they got to know about a mystery client, the man who was supposed to meet up with Shelby for business. So naturally, the police's main suspect was this guy. But there was a problem. No one knew who this guy was. They only had a cell phone number to go off of, but even that was a bit sketchy. The phone used to contact Shelby was a burner phone, and it was activated sometime before her murder. So while the police needed to look into the bizarre details of this man, they also tried to scope out the apartment and swab it for evidence. Shelby's body was taken away for an autopsy because there were so many unanswered questions. And in the meantime, Shelby's aunt and sister, Christina, were given the terrible news in the early hours of November 5th. Christina was in a state of disbelief. She wasn't given all the harrowing details, but she now knew one thing for sure. Her sister, who she tried to protect for all of her life, was now gone. Before long, though, the police had their hands on that autopsy report, and the results were absolutely harrowing as well as unbelievable. Shelby had a singular wound to her neck, but this wound became a topic of conversation in this case. Without going into gruesome details, the wound was a single, calculated, quick, and deep slash. The depth and severity of the wound suggested that the assailant aimed for Shelby with a force of about 1,000 pounds of pressure in one targeted spot. Because of how Shelby was positioned before the attack, she literally had no time to react or even protect herself, which explains the absence of any hesitation or defensive wounds. This autopsy report was a looming question mark for the police. Based on these findings, the police concluded that the murderer had to be someone with either military or a field background, because, as morbid as it sounds, the attack was not sloppy at all. It was calculated and purposeful. The police also tried to find DNA evidence in the apartment, but they were mostly unsuccessful. The police did find discarded contraceptive packaging, which led them to believe that Shelby and the murderer got physically intimate, and then something went wrong and Shelby lost her life. But the murderer was also smart, because they didn't leave any trace of their DNA behind. Well, except for one thing. On Shelby's body, the police were able to find foreign hair strands, as in hair that didn't belong to Shelby. See, Shelby had long blonde hair, and some of the strands found on her body were dark and short. And from the looks of it, it was hair belonging to a male. But speaking of hair, the police also found strands of female hair. But that could be the result of transfer. There's no way to really know for sure. But either way, the police took the hair samples and sent them off for testing and cross-matching in the CODIS database. But shortly after entering the items into the database, police were hit with terrible news, because there was no match. Their investigation had rather quickly reached its first dead end. For 5 months, Shelby's case had no leads, and therefore there was no progress in it either. It was such a hard time for Shelby's family trying to cope with this loss. After 5 months, though, the police came forward with some information. And this is quite possibly the only evidence in this entire case. It was the CCTV footage of the apartment lobby where Shelby lived, the same apartment complex in which apartment 3B was now a crime scene. See, according to the text Shelby received from the mysterious client, the police were able to pinpoint a certain someone walking through the lobby, and possibly towards Shelby's apartment, and everything about this footage was eerie and inexplicable. At 8:34 p.m., surveillance footage obtained by the police showed a man entering the lobby. He was wearing a light-colored full-sleeved shirt and cargo pants, and he was on his phone too. But there was something that stood out to the police. It was 8 in the evening, so it was dark outside, but the man was wearing sunglasses. Not perched on his head or anything, he was wearing them. The man had a very steady and determined walk. He looked tall and buff, and compared to Shelby's petite stature, this man was huge. The man walked casually, but surely. He looked like a man on a mission. He was seen making his way upstairs, and after 23 minutes, he was seen leaving. But here's another very interesting thing. The man looked like he didn't even break a sweat. His clothes were unruffled. He didn't look disheveled. His sunglasses were on his face. There wasn't a single hair out of place on the guy's head. The time it took the man to enter the apartment, commit the murder, and casually just stroll out was mind-boggling. Even stranger, no one knew who the man was. Now, while anonymity in the line of adult work is common, not knowing anything about the clients these young and vulnerable girls are meeting with is just terrifying. Mark didn't even know the client's name, yet he was willing to leave the man alone in a locked room with his supposed main girl. Also, the burner phone that was used to contact Shelby was odd. The phone was bought about a month before the murder at a local Walmart, and it was activated a week before Shelby's murder. But even though that phone was active in the area a full week before the murder, after that, there was no trace of it. Another very odd detail was the fact that this same client had posted anonymously several times online, and he had a very specific taste in women. The mystery client looked for small, petite, blonde women for physical relations. And if you put Shelby's appearance side by side with the man's preferences, she ticked every box. Well, soon enough, the police got in touch with the Walmart where the phone was purchased to check the surveillance footage. But since it had already been 5 months following the murder and 6 months since that phone was purchased, the store didn't have that footage anymore. That means that after all this progress, the investigation had now reached its second dead end. So what exactly happened to Shelby Thornburg? And who was this guy in the sunglasses? Well, there are several main theories here. The first theory is a hitman theory, and this is actually a theory that even Shelby's family believes to some extent. Do you remember Shelby's second arrest just before her murder? She was arrested for solicitation, but she was supposedly getting these charges lifted with the help of a lawyer. Well, it's believed that Shelby's murder was a targeted hit. See, it's alleged that Shelby worked with the police and became an informant for all the sketchy things happening in her line of work. It's alleged that Shelby agreed to become a police informant on the condition of getting her charges lifted, and someone vengeful in her line of work maybe got wind of this. So a hit was ordered on Shelby, and a hitman, under the guise of a client, murdered Shelby so that she wouldn't spill the beans. This theory is somewhat believable, mainly because there were several operations carried out to bust many illegal human trafficking rings in that same area where Shelby lived and worked. But the police don't think so. They're adamant that the illegal ring busts have nothing to do with Shelby's murder case. Case closed. But let's be real, if the police were really running some sort of undercover sting operation, do any of us really believe they'd just open up and tell us about it? Of course not. If this is truly what happened to Shelby, the truth is, we'll probably never know because they'll probably never tell, and you really can't blame them for that. They potentially have dozens of women to protect who are undercover, and revealing the name of just one, it could unravel the entire investigation. But given how many other women are expected to be involved in this operation, and the fact that all of them are within Shelby's circle of so-called co-workers, this theory seems not only highly plausible, but also incredibly likely. But that's really just my opinion. Some people believe that Mark was really the one to blame here. Mark was the person who discovered Shelby's body, and he was also the one who moved her out of the safe and secure apartment in Houston to a sketchy one, simply so that she could see more clients. A lot of people suspected Mark in the beginning. They thought that it was so weird that Mark conveniently didn't know the name of the client or who he even was before scheduling a meeting with Shelby. Mark was responsible for screening Shelby's potential clients, and any suspicious information went through him first. Shelby was his number one client, his main moneymaker. If anyone should have been in charge of protecting her, it was him. After all, if he lost her, he lost the bulk of his income. But the fact of the matter is, the investigators did look into Mark in the beginning, and he was cleared of any involvement. So as far as that goes, it's pretty much case closed. There's no evidence tying Mark to anything. And while he certainly should have vetted Shelby's clients better, there's no obvious reason he would have wanted her out of the picture. The next theory is what police strongly believe to be true. Even the FBI jumped on this case and sided with this theory, and it's the serial killer theory. Investigators very firmly believe that Shelby's murder is the work of a serial killer, and this is believable to some extent. Judging by the fact that the client, possibly a serial killer, had a very specific preference in women, it makes this theory believable too. The serial killer sought out women who were blonde, petite, and in the line of adult work. There's literally evidence of this man trying to search for women who meet this criteria, so the police and the FBI are onto something with this theory. This is classic serial killer stuff, dating all the way back to the days of Jack the Ripper and the countless copycats. The police, as well as the FBI, believe that given the nature of the killing, the serial killer is a seasoned one, and he might even have committed crimes in New Orleans and Texas. The FBI have gone full force into this theory, and Shelby's even listed on their website as being a supposed victim of a serial killer. But the fact of the matter is, whatever happened to Shelby, whatever the reason may be, her killer is still out there, and he's likely hunting for his next victim right now. As of present, the hair strands found at the crime scene still haven't been tested with genealogy, and people are appalled. This murder didn't take place in the 80s or 90s, it happened in 2015. Advanced DNA and gene technology, although expensive, can lead to a breakthrough in this case. At this point, it seems like it's legitimately just a matter of getting the funds together to have that DNA tested, but there may be more to this that we're simply unaware of. Shelby's sister, Christina, is trying hard to spread the word on Shelby's case. She's created a Facebook page on which updates are shared, and she even talks about Shelby's life and her upbringing. Shelby's case did not get the attention that it needed, not then and not now, and it wasn't until a fellow true crime YouTuber, Gavin Fish, reached out to Shelby's sister and went into a deep dive about her life and murder that her case really saw the light of day. Gavin even went through the work of enhancing the footage from the apartment lobby, and if I'm being honest, someone should be able to pretty easily recognize this guy. There's still very little information on Shelby's case though, especially her life and the struggles she went through. And what's available for the public is all thanks to Christina's Facebook page, as well as Gavin and other true crime YouTubers and podcasters for helping bring this case to light. It's been almost 10 years, and Christina is still looking to the law enforcement with hope that her sister's unsolved murder will be closed and that she gets the closure that she needs to move on from this terrible loss. Shelby was a person, a human being, and regardless of what she did for work, willingly or unwillingly, she didn't deserve to have her life taken like that. Shelby's family doesn't deserve to be left in the dark or treated any differently. Shelby deserves justice, just as any victim with a normal lifestyle or profession does as well. Everyone deserves respect, no matter what job they do, or even if they don't have a job. Everyone is a human being who dreams of changing the world, or at least their own lives or their family's lives. You can think what you want about Shelby, but the truth is none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that her killer has not been caught, and every single woman fitting that same description of Shelby is in grave danger. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Rich Davis and Azriana Halleck. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public. And it's a great way to support the channel and help out. I appreciate all of you guys that have decided to do that. If you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find a link down in the description. And don't forget, the new True Crime Stories It's Never a Mannequin t-shirt is also available now at the link below. Every purchase helps support the channel, and you get a really cool shirt in return. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered. And don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and just keeps you up to date with all my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.